Your father is no longer with us, you know. This house belongs to me, his wife. So you better leave soon, my stepmother said in a tone like she was scolding a small child. The funeral for my father had just ended, my heart as dark and heavy as an overcast sky was disturbed, and in my anger I retorted, yours. This is my childhood home. You're the one who should leave. After all your affairs with younger men, betraying my father over and over, you have no right to call yourself his wife. As I glared at her, she placed her hands on her hips and snorted dismissively. Well, that's too bad. Unfortunately for you, I'm inheriting this house and the $1 million estate. I am kind enough to share a little, though. How about $50? With that, my stepmother laughed loudly, and I couldn't help but laugh along. This seemed to annoy her, who furrowed her brow and visibly became upset. What's so funny? No, it's just you really know nothing, do you? Your head is a bit too much in the clouds, isn't it? I then presented a document to her, who was turning red with anger. Can you read this? At that moment, my stepmother's face turned pale. No, it can't be. It's a lie, right? My name is Kelly. I am a 29-year-old homemaker, also working part-time. My father was a lawyer, fairly well known among his peers. He started his own law firm and worked tirelessly with a few colleagues. My mother passed away when I was young, and I barely remember her. My father was always busy with work, so I was raised mostly by my grandmother. However, I never felt dissatisfied with this life. Even without my parents, my grandmother was always kind. And I was fortunate in my other relationships as well, supported by many. I grew up smoothly and graduated from high school without trouble. But as I began to enjoy my university life, a shadow fell over my seemingly perfect existence. A new mother appeared in our family, which had always been just my father and me. This lady will be your mother from today. Try to get along. The woman suddenly introduced to me was clad in designer brands from head to toe. Nice to meet you, Kelly. You can call me Mom, and we can go shopping together. While she seemed like a bright and beautiful person, someone I might have gotten along with as a neighbor, living with her as a mother was a different story. In conclusion, our personalities did not mesh well. I'm more of an indoor person, preferring to relax at home with a coffee on days off. On the other hand, my stepmother couldn't sit still, always going out shopping or to drinking parties. I didn't exactly dislike her, but we tended to avoid each other. But that wasn't the real problem. What came later was much more significant. After graduating from university, I was hired as an office worker at a general company. My workplace was about a 20-minute train ride from home, so I planned to commute from my parents' house for the time being. My relationship with my stepmother continued as usual, without any attacks or harassment, so I decided not to move out immediately. Anyway, about 6 months after joining the company, I attended a social gathering organized by my colleagues. I'm not good with alcohol, so I wasn't enthusiastic. But I couldn't miss the drinking party as almost all my coworkers were going. On the way home from the party, walking with a few people who were heading in the same direction through a bustling street crowd, I spotted a familiar figure from behind. It was my stepmother. While thinking that this was where she was hanging out, I inadvertently looked next to her and noticed an unfamiliar young man walking alongside her. If they were merely walking next to each other, I could have believed they were just friends despite the age difference. However, shockingly, she had her arm entwined with the young man's arm. The unmistakably intimate atmosphere made me involuntarily catch my breath. A colleague walking next to me asked, "What's wrong?" All I could do was laugh it off, unable to tell a colleague who I had only known for a few months that my stepmother might be cheating with a young man. So I made up an excuse about having somewhere to be and sent my colleagues home first, deciding to follow my stepmother. Fortunately, it was easy to follow them in the bustling crowd of the lively downtown area. My stepmother and the young man occasionally leaned in close to talk to each other, looking every bit like a cozy couple. After about 3 minutes of walking, my stepmother and the young man looked around cautiously before entering a building. It turned out to be a lodging facility. The shock was so great that I felt nauseous, but quickly left the area. I had sensed that my stepmother was a flashy, sociable type, but I never imagined she would cheat. This was a betrayal against my father and against me as well. Angered by her immoral behavior, I decided to confront her the next day when she returned home in the morning. As if nothing had happened, she said sarcastically, slightly drunk from a night of drinking, "I saw you were arm in arm with a young man entering a short-stay hotel." Try making an excuse for that, caught off guard by my directness. My stepmother froze with her mouth open, but quickly managed a smile. Are you sure that was really me? You didn't see me from the front, right? Maybe it was someone who looks like me." She was implicitly challenging me to produce proof. That put me in a difficult position because I didn't have any evidence, even though I saw it with my own eyes. She could easily dodge the issue like this. "You're too naive, Kelly dear. Maybe it's because you're from a good family. You want to drive me out of the house, but that's too bad. Come back when you can prove it." With that, she lifted her chin triumphantly and looked down at me. Frustrated, I decided to prove her infidelity. I spent all the money I could on a private investigator who, after a week, confirmed my suspicions. Astonishingly, it turned out that she was cheating with 3 different men at the same time, all of them young. Now, armed with this information, I went to my father. He had always been busy since my childhood. "Dad, it's about Mom," I said. My father glanced at me briefly before returning his gaze to the documents in front of him. "I'm busy now. Talk later. And it's Mom, not the woman. I don't care about that she's cheating." I was cut off as my father's smartphone rang. He answered it without excusing himself. It was always like this, neglected by a father too busy with his work. It might sound immature for someone over 20, but it wasn't fair. What was I getting so heated about? What was I even expecting? It all seemed so foolish. Disillusioned, I decided to move out on my own, distancing myself physically from my father and stepmother. Living on my own for the first time was chaotic and challenging, but life was more comfortable without my indifferent father and my reckless stepmother. Years later, I started dating a senior colleague at work, and we eventually got married. After discussing it, we decided not to have a wedding ceremony. If I had a wedding ceremony, I would have to face my father and stepmother. I just couldn't accept that. Instead, I wore a wedding dress and sent only my father a photo of it. After that, the life of just my husband and me began. We were happiest planning our future life together, like building a house once we saved a bit more money or thinking about having children soon. In the years since I started living alone, I rarely heard from my father, so it was a shock when his name appeared on my smartphone screen that day. "Hello, what do you want now?" The voice that came through the phone was of a man I didn't recognize. He introduced himself as one of my father's colleagues and said that my father had suddenly collapsed at work and was taken to the hospital. I was on a break at work, so I explained the situation to my boss and immediately took a taxi to the hospital where my father was taken. When I arrived at the hospital, there was a man in a suit standing at the entrance. It seemed he had come to meet me. He led me to a hospital room where my father lay in bed, looking pale, with various tubes connected to him and not moving at all. "Dad," I involuntarily sat down beside the bed, and my father's colleague offered me a chair and said, We can't reach his wife. It seemed he had tried to contact my stepmother at the same time as me but couldn't get through, no matter how many times he called. Such bad timing in an emergency. My father's colleague said he would try to contact her again, but I couldn't trouble him further. Reluctantly, I decided to call my stepmother from my smartphone. I tried calling, but she didn't answer. 10 minutes later, I called again with the same result. About 30 minutes later, my stepmother finally called back. "What do you want? It's troublesome to receive so many calls." "I have my own things to deal with," she grumbled. I finally got through. "Actually, Dad has collapsed and is now at the hospital. It's the big hospital in front of the station. When can you come?" As I relayed this with restrained irritation, my stepmother groaned. Then, in an unnaturally cheerful voice, she said, "Well, I can't make it. I'm really busy. So I'll leave everything about him to you, Kelly. Call me if something happens. Bye-bye." Before I could reply, my stepmother had already hung up unilaterally. I tried to call back immediately, but couldn't get through. She might have turned off her phone. I had thought that even a woman who cheated would come to the hospital if her husband collapsed, but I was too optimistic. "Leave everything to you," as she said. My stepmother did not come to visit, let alone care for him during that time. I took care of hospital admissions, daily care, and paperwork using up my paid leave. Although my father and I had been estranged for years, I was still worried about him in this situation. I did everything I could, hoping he would wake up soon. As I visited the hospital daily, but that wish was not fulfilled. Eventually, my father never woke up and passed away. Then things were so hectic, I barely remember them, and I had no time to mourn. I had to contact lawyers and acquaintances from the law firm my father had started, arrange for the funeral, and there was a lot to do. The people from my father's office helped with contacting relevant parties, which was a relief. But my stepmother did nothing as she had said, and only showed up on the day of the funeral. There, in front of everyone, she cried at my father's coffin. She hadn't helped when my father or I was in trouble, but she acted like a tragic heroine when others were watching. Watching how far would she go in mocking people. At that moment, I found myself moving. I forcefully grabbed my stepmother's arm and took her outside the venue. "Enough, you are so insincere. Never show your face to me again." I said this in anger. My stepmother immediately stopped crying. "Huh, what?" Acting all high and mighty, huh? "Fine, I'll leave for today. Just wait and see who will have the last laugh later." With those ominous words, she left with loud footsteps. 2 weeks later, after the funeral, and once everything settled down, I visited my childhood home for the first time in years. I was there to start organizing my father's belongings in earnest. While I had previously moved documents related to his work to his law firm, personal items like his clothes and books had remained untouched. I didn't think my stepmother would bother to sort through them, so it was up to me. About an hour into sorting and cleaning, my stepmother, who seemed to have been out, came home. She burst into the living room with vigor. "Oh my, Kelly, what are you doing here? This house is mine now. You shouldn't just come in uninvited." She said this in a tone one might use to scold a small child. I countered while I continued to organize my father's effects. "Yours? This is my childhood home. The one intruding is you." At that, my stepmother placed her hands on her hips and puffed out her chest dramatically. "This house and $1 million inheritance are mine to inherit, but because I'm generous, I might share a little with you. How about, say, $50? I couldn't help but laugh at her high-pitched laughter. This seemed to annoy her, and she frowned deeply, her face clearly showing displeasure. "What's so funny? What are you even talking about? You have no right to the inheritance. As I said this, my stepmother froze as if time had stopped. And when she finally understood, her face turned red with anger. I am his wife. It's only natural that I inherit the house and the money, she insisted. Yes, his common-law wife, right? Common-law spouses aren't legal heirs. Didn't you know that? I widened my eyes in feigned surprise. You probably avoided submitting a marriage certificate to have an easy out when your affairs were discovered. But it backfired, didn't it? You're always sloppy when it matters most. Sorry, but you can't kick me out. It's you who should be leaving. Oh, and if you need money, shall I give you some? How about, let's see, $50? I said this as if releasing years of pent-up frustration. My stepmother's face turned even redder, probably from embarrassment. But a common-law wife can inherit if there's a will, right? And what about being the beneficiary of a life insurance policy? My stepmother was desperately trying to find a way to get her hands on the inheritance, but it was futile. I am the beneficiary of the life insurance, and there was no will. He passed away suddenly, and I think survivor's pension might be difficult too. You would need to prove your status as a common-law wife, but with evidence of your affairs, it's probably not going to be recognized. Though I wasn't very familiar with the details of survivor pensions, it seemed effective in intimidating my stepmother as her hopes were dashed one by one. Her face grew more stern, and I delivered the final blow. You're a complete stranger here. Pack your things and leave, or I'll call the police, I stated firmly. My stepmother bit her lower lip in frustration, hurriedly packed her clothes into a suitcase, and stormed out of the house. Rumors of what happened to her reached me later. Having relied on my father's income, she hadn't worked for years. Therefore, she couldn't find a full-time job now and was living a day-to-day life doing odd jobs. However, her selfish nature didn't change, and she soon tried to approach old acquaintances for support. But none of them were willing to take her in. Who was lacking money and no longer possessing the beauty of her youth? Then my stepmother took an outrageous step. She appeared before my husband claiming, I am more beautiful and appealing as a woman than Kelly. It seemed she wanted to orchestrate a scenario where I would witness this and think it was an affair. But naturally, my husband refused her advances. Frustrated at not getting money, my stepmother tried to wreck my family, which only made her seem pitiful. Later, I swiftly called the police, and my stepmother received a stern warning. Hopefully, she learned her lesson from this incident. Incidentally, when I was sorting through my father's belongings, I found something curious. It was his diary. Though it might be wrong to read someone's diary, even if they have passed away, I was too curious about his thoughts and read a little. The entries were full of words of concern for my health and future prospects. Is Kelly eating properly? Is she not suffering too much at her job? Were some of the lines written? It appeared that my father had worked so hard because he wanted to ensure I wouldn't struggle financially in the future. Tucked in the diary was a photo. It showed my young father, my biological mother, and me, all smiling. I was in my mother's arms, and my father was hugging her shoulder. Seeing that photo, I finally felt it. I was loved by my parents. There was another photo in the diary, a recent one of my father and my stepmother. While I didn't understand why my father maintained a common-law relationship with my stepmother, it seemed he cared about her in his way. Unfortunately, that feeling was not reciprocated by her. I resolved to become someone who could not only receive love, but also understand it. Then, to my joy, I found out I was pregnant. We recently visited the hospital, and it seems the baby is developing well. Looking ahead to when our child grows up, my husband and I decided to live in the house my father left us. Our current rented apartment doesn't have enough space for a child's room. We've decided to spend money for our child's sake. Everything is for the sake of our forthcoming child. Just as my parents loved me, I will love this child. I made that promise to myself.
The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beep of the monitors. Then, my mother-in-law's voice cut through the silence like a knife. "I've listed your house for sale," she said, sounding pleased with herself. That tiny place was never good enough for my son David. My name is Olivia Parker. I was 34, lying in a hospital bed recovering from emergency surgery, when my mother-in-law, Eleanor, decided to take control. I had been hospitalized for a ruptured appendix, and she saw this as the perfect chance to make her move. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be drowsy while my mind raced. The house she wanted to sell wasn't just any house. It was my childhood home, the place where I grew up, where my late father taught me to paint, and where my mother spent her last days. Every part of that Victorian house held memories, but ever since David and I got married 3 years ago, Eleanor had been trying to erase them. "You should be thanking me," Eleanor continued, sitting down and resting her expensive purse on her lap. "I've already got interested buyers. My real estate friend, Jessica, has been so helpful. Finally, we can get David into a neighborhood that suits his status." I slowly opened my eyes and met her smug gaze. "Do what you need to do, Eleanor," I said calmly. She blinked, clearly surprised. She expected me to cry, beg, or protest. Instead, I seemed unfazed. What she didn't know was that I had been preparing for something like this for months. This wasn't her first attempt to control our lives. She had already tried redecorating our home without asking, throwing out family heirlooms she thought were ugly, and pushing us to move to a fancier neighborhood. "Good," she said, regaining her confidence. "Jessica will bring the paperwork tomorrow. We already have an offer. The buyers want to tear it down and build something modern." She scrolled through her phone, probably checking messages from her real estate agent friend. Eleanor loved using her connections, flaunting her status, and manipulating situations. But this time, she had gone too far. "Does David know about this?" I asked. She waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I'll tell him once everything's settled. You know how he is, better to present it as a done deal." I did know. My husband had no patience for his mother's schemes. That's why she always worked behind his back. He was away at a medical conference, which was why she picked now to strike. "You're right," I said, adjusting my blanket. "It's better to keep things simple." Eleanor smiled, thinking she had won. She stood up, smoothing her expensive skirt. "I'm so glad you're being reasonable, Olivia. Jessica will bring the papers tomorrow. You just focus on getting better." As she left, I reached for my phone. First, I texted my best friend Anna, who was also a real estate lawyer. "It's happening. Time to move forward with the plan." Then I called Tom, my father's old friend and my actual real estate agent. "Hey Tom, remember what we talked about?" Eleanor just made her move. "I'm already on it," he said. "I have the paperwork ready. Want me to bring it to the hospital?" "Yes, and make sure it's airtight." After hanging up, I lay back, thinking about the house Eleanor wanted to sell, the porch where I spent summers with my parents, the art studio my father built, the garden my mother cared for. This house wasn't just a building, it was my history, my heart. Eleanor never understood why David and I chose to live there instead of buying something fancier. To her, it was all about status. But some things are more important than appearances, like love, memories, and family. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. It was Anna, walking in with her briefcase and a determined look. "I got your text." So Eleanor finally made her move. I nodded. She's bringing her real estate agent tomorrow. She thinks she can sell my house while I'm stuck in this bed. Anna opened her laptop. Good thing we spent months making sure she can't do that. Should we call David now or wait until her agent shows up? I thought for a moment. David needed to know, but timing was everything. "Let's wait," I said. "I want to see exactly what they tried to pull first." Anna grinned. "All right, let's go over everything one more time. Eleanor's agent is in for a big surprise." I smiled, imagining Eleanor's face when she realized she had lost. Sometimes the best way to beat a manipulator isn't to fight them, it's to be one step ahead. The plan was in place. Now, we just had to wait. The next morning, Eleanor stormed into my hospital room, dressed to perfection as always. Behind her was a polished woman in a business suit, Jessica, her real estate agent friend. Neither of them seemed concerned that they were trying to sell a house they had no right to sell. "Olivia, dear," Eleanor said sweetly, "this is Jessica Miller. She brought the paperwork for you to sign. We've already got a great offer, $50,000 over asking price. Isn't that wonderful?" Jessica pulled out a folder, spreading papers across my hospital tray. "Mrs. Parker, just sign here, and we can move forward with the sale. The buyers are very eager." A voice cleared from the doorway. Eleanor turned, her smile fading. "Who are you?" "Tom Reynolds," the man said, stepping inside. "I'm the licensed real estate agent for this property." He calmly set his own folder on the table, moving Jessica's paperwork aside. Eleanor's face turned red. "Jessica is handling the sale." "No," I said, keeping my voice steady. "She isn't. Tom has been my real estate agent for 15 years. He handled the property transfer after my parents passed away." Jessica shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Parker, your mother-in-law assured me she had the authority to list the property. Did she show you any proof of that authority?" Tom asked, his voice firm. Jessica didn't answer. Eleanor jumped in. "I'm David's mother. This house isn't good enough for him, and as his mother, I have every right." "You have no rights to this property at all," another voice interrupted. Anna walked in, briefcase in hand. "I'm Anna Chen, Olivia's attorney. And Mrs. Miller, you are dangerously close to breaking several real estate laws." Jessica paled as Anna pulled out a stack of documents. "This house belongs to a family trust created by Olivia's parents. Neither of you have any legal authority to sell it." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "David is my son, as her husband." "David has no claim to it either," Anna said. "The trust is ironclad. And here's something interesting." She handed Jessica a document. "This is a complaint I've prepared for the Real Estate Commission about your attempt to sell property without legal authority." Jessica's face turned white. "Mrs. Winston," she hissed, looking at Eleanor, "you told me you had power of attorney." Eleanor clutched her purse. I was just trying to help David. Olivia is being selfish, clinging to this old house when they could live somewhere better." Tom's voice was firm. "Mrs. Winston, I suggest you leave. If you try anything else, we'll take legal action." Jessica quickly gathered her papers. "I apologize, Mrs. Parker. I should have verified the authority to sell. This won't happen again." She hurried out, avoiding my eyes. Eleanor stayed, her face tight with anger. "Olivia, you're making a mistake. I only want what's best for David." "No," I said quietly. "You want what you think is best, but this isn't your decision." "We'll see what David has to say," she snapped. "Yes," a familiar voice said from the doorway. "Let's see what I have to say." There stood my husband, conference badge still hanging around his neck. Eleanor froze. "David, you're back early. I was just trying to help you and Olivia find a better home." "By selling our house behind our backs while Olivia is in the hospital?" David's voice was low but firm. "Mom, we need to talk. Outside. Now." As Eleanor followed him out, I could see the shock on her face. She had finally gone too far, and she knew it. I exchanged glances with Anna and Tom, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. The house was safe. More importantly, Eleanor's days of interference were coming to an end. Through the window, I saw David speaking to his mother, his face serious. For the first time, Eleanor looked small, her confidence gone. Sometimes the best way to fight back isn't just being prepared. It's having the right people in your corner. The next few days brought significant changes. David moved my recovery to the sunroom of our Victorian home, the very room Eleanor had deemed outdated and depressing. Surrounded by my father's artwork and my mother's thriving plants, I felt stronger with each passing day. David had been uncharacteristically quiet about his conversation with Eleanor, but its impact was evident. She hadn't called or visited since the hospital incident, and through family gossip, I learned she retreated to her country club, nursing her wounded pride. I told her she needs therapy, David finally shared one evening as we sat on our wraparound porch. I made it clear that if she wants to be part of our lives, she has to respect our boundaries. No more manipulation, no more trying to control everything. I squeezed his hand, watching the sunset paint our garden in golden hues. How did she take it? Not well initially, he admitted. But I think seeing me stand up to her, plus the legal trouble she almost caused her friend Jessica. It finally got through to her that she can't always have her way. Jessica, as we learned, had faced her own consequences. The attempted unauthorized sale had been reported to the Real Estate Commission, resulting in a formal reprimand and mandatory ethics training. Eleanor's influence had nearly cost her friend her license. A week later, something unexpected arrived. A letter from Eleanor. I recognized her elaborate handwriting on the envelope, but the tone of the letter inside was different from anything she'd written before. "Dear Olivia," it began, "I owe you an apology. My behavior was inexcusable. I've spent so many years believing I knew best that I forgot to see what was already perfect right in front of me. Your home isn't just a house, it's a testament to love and family history, something I should have respected." She went on to explain that she'd started seeing a therapist, trying to understand why she felt such a need to control everything. "David's happiness should have been enough," she wrote. "Instead, I almost destroyed my relationship with my son because I couldn't see past my own expectations." The letter ended with a request, not a demand, to help restore the garden my mother had loved so much. "If you're willing," she wrote, "I'd like to learn about the memories this place holds. Maybe then I can understand why it means so much to both of you." David found me crying over the letter in the kitchen. "Mom told me she was writing to you," he said softly. "She's trying, Olivia. For the first time in her life, she's really trying." 2 weeks later, Eleanor came to visit. Gone were the designer suits and critical comments. Instead, she arrived in gardening clothes, ready to help replant my mother's favorite roses. As we worked together in the dirt, she asked about my parents, genuinely listening as I shared stories about growing up in this house. "I get it now," she said quietly, patting soil around a new rose bush. "This isn't about the house itself. It's about keeping their love alive." Looking at her there, hands dirty, hair slightly messy, I saw a different Eleanor emerging, one who was learning that control and love don't go hand in hand. That evening, as David, Eleanor, and I sat on the porch enjoying lemonade, she looked around with new eyes. "This place has character," she admitted. "And more importantly, it has heart. I'm sorry I couldn't see that before." David squeezed my hand, and I felt the last tension between us dissolve. Sometimes the biggest victories come not from winning battles, but from helping others see what truly matters. Today, Eleanor visits regularly, but always calls first. She's learning to appreciate our home for what it is, a place filled with love, memories, and now, new beginnings. The roses she helped plant are blooming, adding their beauty to my mother's garden. And every time I see them, I'm reminded that change is possible, even in the most unlikely places. The Victorian house stands proud, unchanged by Eleanor's schemes, but transformed by her growth. It remains what it has always been, not just a house, but a home where love grows and memories live on. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching someone learn to see the beauty in what they once tried to destroy. "I'm doing you a favor, Emma." Sarah's voice oozed with artificial sympathy through my phone's speaker. "You can't possibly manage that big house while you're sick. Besides, we've already moved in. The kids love it here." My fingers tightened around the cold metal railing of my hospital bed, my knuckles whitening as I fought to steady my trembling hands. 3 weeks of chemotherapy had left me exhausted, but nothing could have prepared me for this. "Sarah," I said, forcing my voice to remain calm despite the fire burning in my chest, "you can't just move into my house without permission." "Oh, but I did," she laughed, the sound sharp and grating. "And honestly, the place needed a woman's touch. Those dreary old paintings of your mother's, I put them in the garage with the rest of the junk. My mother's paintings, the ones she had poured her soul into during her final years, each brushstroke a piece of her heart left behind for me. The house had been her last gift, a sanctuary she'd had chosen knowing I would need a place to heal after she was gone. "Don't touch those paintings," I warned, my voice steel beneath the softness. But Sarah barely paused. "Listen, Emma, you need to face reality. You're sick. You can barely take care of yourself. James and I are doing you a huge favor by taking over. The house will be full of life again, instead of just you rattling around alone in it." My brother James, of course, he had gone along with this. He had always let Sarah take the lead, even when it meant trampling over his own sister. "I'll be home next week," I said firmly, "and I expect—" "Next week," Sarah cut me off with a scoff. But we're already settled in. The kids are in school. I joined the neighborhood association. You can't seriously expect us to leave now. Besides, wouldn't you rather be somewhere cozy? An apartment, maybe, where you don't have to worry about a peep. I ended the call, my hand trembling as I set the phone down. Through the hospital window, the city skyline stretched out before me, the same view my mother had looked at during her own battle with cancer. But unlike her, I wasn't going to let this disease take everything from me. What Sarah didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had been preparing for this moment from the day of my diagnosis. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was just knowing my sister-in-law's penchant for opportunism, but I had ensured my home was legally untouchable. My phone buzzed again. A message from my neighbor, Mrs. Anderson. They're throwing out boxes from your garage. Should I call the police? I exhaled slowly, a small smile curling my lips. No need, I replied. Just keep taking pictures of everything they remove. Thank you for being my eyes. Mrs. Anderson, a retired legal secretary with a razor-sharp mind and an even sharper tongue, had been my mother's closest friend. When I had told her about my diagnosis, she had immediately offered to keep watch over the house. She had been documenting Sarah's slow takeover for weeks. Another text came through, this time from my lawyer, Michael. Everything is ready whenever you want to proceed. How are you feeling? Like teaching my sister-in-law a lesson about karma, I typed back. I leaned against my pillows, imagining the look on Sarah's face when she realized the trap she had walked into. She thought she was taking advantage of my weakness, but she had unwittingly handed me all the evidence I needed. The next morning, an unexpected visitor appeared. James stood in my hospital doorway, shifting uneasily, his expression uncertain. He started, then stopped, taking in the sight of me. The chemo had stolen my hair, but it hadn't stolen my resolve. I sat up straighter, meeting his gaze head-on. Sarah says you're making things difficult about the house, he muttered. She's just trying to help. Is that what she told you? My voice was quiet but firm. That moving into my house without permission, throwing out Mom's paintings and telling me I should live in an apartment is helping. He shifted uncomfortably. You know how she is. She gets carried away. But she means well. Does she? I reached for my phone and pulled up the photos Mrs. Anderson had sent. Does this look like someone who means well? I showed him the images. Sarah tossing my mother's paintings into a trash pile, her friends carrying out my furniture, Sarah posing triumphantly in front of my house with a new home sign. James paled. I didn't know. You never do, I said softly. You never want to see her for who she really is. But this time, James, your wife has gone too far. He sank into the chair beside my bed, rubbing his face. What are you going to do? I thought of the legal documents waiting to be filed, the security footage, the meticulous records Mrs. Anderson had kept. The net was already tightening around Sarah, and she didn't even know it. I'm going to show her what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness, I said. The question is, whose side are you on? James hesitated, then finally met my gaze, seeing not his sickly little sister, but the woman who had inherited our mother's steel spine. What do you need me to do? He asked. I sent a quick message to Michael, the final piece locking into place. Just watch, I told James, and maybe for once stand with your family instead of enabling her games. As he left, I caught my reflection in the window. I might have looked fragile, but inside, I had never been stronger. Sarah thought she had won. She had no idea that next week she was in for the homecoming of a lifetime. The day I was discharged from a hospital, Mrs. Anderson sent me a video that ignited a fury deep in my bones. Sarah stood in my mother's art studio, now desecrated into what she smugly called her meditation space. Mom's hand-painted murals were buried beneath tacky motivational posters, the kind that peddled empty platitudes. And this is where I'll be teaching my wellness classes. Sarah's voice trilled, undoubtedly filming for her social media. Sometimes the universe just knows what you need, and this house was meant to be mine. I watched the clip 3 times during the taxi ride home, each replay tightening the knot of resolve in my chest. When we pulled up, my eyes locked onto Sarah's overpriced SUV, parked right where my mother's beloved rose garden used to be. The flowers she had tended for 20 years had been ripped out, replaced with soulless artificial turf. Need help, dear? Mrs. Anderson called from her porch, already heading my way. She took my small bag while I steadied myself with my cane, the lingering weakness from chemo making my steps deliberate but unwavering. "She's throwing a housewarming party today," Mrs. Anderson murmured as we approached the door. "Invited the whole neighborhood. Didn't expect you home so soon." Perfect. I didn't knock. It was, after all, my house. Laughter and a clinking of glasses spilled from the living room. Sarah stood at the center, holding court among a cluster of equally vapid guests. "Emma," her voice pitched high in surprise, her smile faltering for a split second before snapping back into place. We weren't expecting you. Should you really be out of the hospital?" The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward me, my frail frame, my cane, the headscarf covering my scalp. The pity in their stares was exactly what Sarah had banked on. "Well, I couldn't possibly miss your housewarming party," I said sweetly, "especially since you're warming my house." A ripple of discomfort passed through the crowd. Clearly, Sarah had spun a very different version of events. "Oh, Emma, you're confused," she cooed, stepping forward with exaggerated concern. "We talked about this. James and I are taking care of the house while you focus on getting better, remember?" "Actually," I said, raising my voice so there was no mistaking my words, "I remember quite clearly that you moved in without permission while I was having chemotherapy. Just like I remember you throwing away my mother's paintings." More shifting. Guests inching toward the door. "That's not. I would never," Sarah sputtered, her face flushing. "James, tell her." My brother stood by the fireplace, his moment of reckoning staring him in the face. "No, Sarah." His voice was quiet but firm. "You're the one who needs to listen." Sarah's expression twisted in rage. "What is wrong with all of you? I'm trying to help. Emma can't possibly manage this house in her condition. I'm doing her a favor." "A favor?" I pulled out my phone and hit play. Sarah's own voice filled the room. "Once Emma's gone, this place will finally have a real family in it again. She never appreciated it anyway." The last of Sarah's friends grabbed their purses and practically fled. "You've been recording me?" Sarah shrieked. "That's illegal. Not in your own home," Mrs. Anderson said coolly. "And this is Emma's home, as the property records clearly show." "Not for long," Sarah snapped. "We've already started the paperwork to transfer the deed. Haven't we, James?" James looked at his feet. "No, Sarah. We haven't. And we won't." Sarah's face went from red to purple. "What do you mean, no? We talked about this. Emma needs to be in a facility where she can get proper care. This house is wasted on her." "Mrs. Harrison," I called out. My mother's old lawyer stepped in from the front porch, briefcase in hand. Perfect timing. "No," Sarah shrieked, panic rising in her voice. "You can't make us leave. We have rights." Mrs. Harrison opened her briefcase. "Actually, he don't. I have here documentation of your illegal occupancy, destruction of property, and attempted theft. You have exactly 1 hour to collect your personal belongings before the police arrive to escort you out." Sarah turned to James, eyes brimming with desperate tears. "You're going to let them do this to us? To your own family? My family?" James' voice held an edge I hadn't heard in years. "Emma is my family. Mom was my family. And I've let you disrespect them both for far too long." I watched as Sarah's carefully curated world collapsed. All the power she thought she wielded, the control she'd tried to exert over my life, it was slipping through her fingers. 1 hour, I reminded her. "And Sarah, those paintings you threw away, they were appraised at over $50,000 each. You'll be hearing from my lawyer about that too." Sarah stormed upstairs, still shrieking her protests. James hesitated, then turned back to me. I'm so sorry," he started. "I know." I sank onto Mom's favorite armchair, one of the few things Sarah hadn't managed to discard. "But sorry isn't enough this time, James. You need to decide what kind of person you want to be." He nodded, understanding the weight of my words. This wasn't just about the house. It was about years of silence, of enabling, of choosing Sarah over his real family. "I'll help her pack," he said finally. "And then, maybe we can talk. Really talk." I nodded, watching him go. Mrs. Anderson sat beside me and took my hand. "Your mother would be so proud," she murmured. "You handled that exactly as she would have." I squeezed her hand, thinking of Mom. Her strength, her unwavering love, her refusal to let anyone trample over what she built. Sarah thought cancer made me weak, I said. She didn't realize it made me stronger than ever. Above us, Sarah's voice raged on. But it didn't matter. I was home, and I was here to stay. The next step would be reclaiming my space, erasing every trace of Sarah's intrusion. But first, I had a family to rebuild, starting with my brother, if he was finally ready to be the man I knew he could be. The first step was getting my home back, undoing everything Sarah had tried to erase. But before that, I had to rebuild my family, starting with my brother James, if he was finally ready to be the person I knew he could be. 3 months after Sarah left, my house finally felt like home again. The walls, once covered with her corny quotes, now displayed my mother's beautiful paintings. Each one told a story of strength, just like my own. James started visiting every Sunday, this time without Sarah. At first, our conversations were awkward, full of silences. But slowly, we started fixing what Sarah had tried to break. One afternoon, James brought me something special. "I found this in my attic," he said, handing me a familiar package. It was Mom's old sketchbook, filled with drawings of the garden she had loved. "I thought Sarah threw this away," I whispered, running my fingers over the pages. "I saved it," he admitted. "It was the one time I stood up to her. I just couldn't let it go. My last chemo session was 2 weeks ago, and my doctor was hopeful. My hair was growing back, soft and fuzzy." James teased me, calling it my baby bird look. But more than that, my strength was returning, not just physically, but emotionally too. Every morning, Mrs. Anderson helped me replant Mom's roses. We discovered that Sarah hadn't managed to kill them all. Some had survived in Mrs. Anderson's garden. She had secretly moved them the day Sarah started tearing them out. "Your mother always said roses are like people," Mrs. Anderson told me. "The strongest ones survive the hardest winters and bloom even brighter." Even the neighborhood had changed. The people who once believed Sarah's lies now came to apologize. Some brought plants from their gardens to help restore mine. Then last week, I got a letter from Sarah's lawyer. She wanted me to pay her for the improvements she made to my house. I couldn't help but laugh. She really doesn't give up, does she? James sighed when I showed him. "No," I said, "but neither do I." My lawyer sent back a list of all the damage Sarah had done, including the cost of my mother's painting she had thrown away. We never heard from her again. Meanwhile, my mother's old art studio had become my safe place. I had even started painting, not as well as Mom, but with the same spirit. It felt like she was still here, guiding me. James now brought his kids over, something Sarah had never allowed. They loved hearing stories about their grandmother and helping in the garden. One day, my niece asked, "Aunt Emma, why did Mom hate this place so much?" James looked uncomfortable, but I answered, "Sometimes people hate what they don't understand. Your mom didn't see that a house is more than just walls. It's memories, love, and family history." Then something unexpected happened. Sarah had scammed people into paying for wellness classes in my house. When they showed up, expecting lessons, I invited them in for tea instead. "We had no idea," one woman said. "Sarah told us she inherited this house." Now, every Wednesday, they came not for wellness classes, but for art therapy. We painted, gardened, and healed together. Mom would have loved it. James finally decided to divorce Sarah. Trying to steal my house had been the last straw. It wouldn't be easy. Sarah was threatening to take everything, but he was standing his ground. "You taught me that," he told me one day over coffee. "Watching you fight back, not with anger, but with dignity, it showed me what real strength looks like." Then yesterday, I finally felt ready to open the box of Mom's things that Sarah had thrown in the garage. Inside, I found a letter from Mom, written during her own cancer battle. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, life has thrown you a challenge that feels impossible. But remember, our family doesn't break, we bend. We grow stronger in the broken places. This house is your sanctuary, your strength, your heritage. Don't let anyone take that from you." Looking around at the restored paintings, the blooming garden, and the family photos back in place, I knew Mom would be proud. Sarah had tried to erase us, but instead she made our roots grow deeper. The doorbell rang. It was Mrs. Anderson with cookies. Outside, new roses bloomed where Sarah's fake grass used to be. Life always finds a way to grow, even after the worst storms. This house isn't just a building. It's proof of survival, of family, of the strength we find when we refuse to be torn down. Sarah thought my illness made me weak, but it only showed me how strong I truly am. Sometimes the best revenge isn't fighting back, it's thriving despite those who tried to break you. The garden blooms, the art flows, and love fills this house again. That's a victory Sarah will never take away.